right, good morning everybody and welcome back to True Crime Loser. How you doing today? That sounds awesome. So, today I'm going to tell you guys the story and go over the eventual interrogation of James Hanzey. And the first thing you gotta note when talking about James Hanzey, at some point he had an extremely unfortunate weight gain, where his torso gained a lot of weight, but his arms stayed the same. So you'll notice if you watch his interrogation, he has this remarkably round, plump torso, which is connected to like skinny, or maybe they're normal size, but just in relation to his big torso. But he's got these like it looks like my arms connected to a fat guy, and he's waving them around, and the whole thing starts to look like an absurd carnival routine. He's sitting there, it looks like someone's behind him like putting their arms through his shirt. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So James Hanzey worked for the Buckeye Lake, Ohio police force for 34 years, and then in 2013, I don't know what quality they saw in him or how the hell this happened, but in 2013, they made him the chief of police. That's the top guy, the boss. He is responsible for every single report and log and piece of information that goes to the city council for organization of the whole station. It all comes down, as of 2013, to James Hanzey. And pretty soon after he becomes police chief, pretty much no one is happy with the job that he's doing. The people that work for him, the city council, the mayor, nobody. And a lot of the stories and complaints are he goes home a lot. When he's supposed to be working, he just goes home. And there's a story where two police officers need to get a hold of him, and he was supposed to be there and he wasn't, so they're like, well, he's probably home, let's go and see let's go to his house. So they go to his house, and when they get there, he's sitting on the couch watching Cops. So in what could be described as the human species' greatest accomplishment, for a brief moment on planet Earth when they got there were cops watching a cop watching cops. That has to have something to do with quantum physics or fractals or something. And also, he was just wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and he was supposed to be wearing you're supposed to be wearing your uniform, and so there were stories like that bubbling up, and his colleagues started making notes of things like that. And the mayor, there was a new mayor. He was there for so long that he went through a bunch of mayors, and it seemed like, maybe 2 or 3 mayors ago, they let him kind of do his thing, and then as the new mayor started, it started to tighten up, and then it all came to a head with the new mayor. I think her name is Peggy Wells. So the mayor is just not happy with him. No one he works with is happy with him. And then there's an incident where he fell at his house, injuring his fingernail on his finger. And then the story is that I guess that injury to his fingernail got infected so bad that he had to have half of his ring finger amputated. And so he has his ring finger amputated, and the doctor tells him, you can't come back to service being a police officer until whatever, the 12th or something. He gives him a date. You can't go back, because he's sitting there with a bandaged hand from his fingernail infection nightmare. And so that's where we pick up the story. So he's got a bandaged hand. He's not allowed to come back to work for a few days. And this is the story that really broke the camel's back, which put him under investigation, which led to the interrogation, which we are going to go over. And so sitting there with a bandaged hand, not legally allowed to work yet, and he and 2 other law enforcement officers are eating at BW's, which is Buffalo Wild Wings. And on the way back from Buffalo Wild Wings, he gets a call. James Hanzey does, on his cell phone. And it is a woman that he knows indirectly because the woman's brother is a firefighter. So it makes sense that this woman's having a little trouble. She has an in with the chief of police through her firefighter brother. So she gives James Hanzey a call on the way home from Buffalo Wild Wings. And she says, James, my old mother is out in the middle of the street. And James will say in the interrogation that he actually did know his mother, the mother from McDonald's. And by the size and shape and consistency of James's torso, I think he probably eats a lot of just trash food. And so the woman says, James, my mother called, my older mother called, she's out in the middle of the road. She said that 2 men came into her apartment with guns. She was able to escape, but one of the men shot the other men with his gun, and then the guy is dying inside the trailer, and they're still in there, and she's out wandering around in the middle of the road. And so James, the chief of police, says, all right, he says he either was with one other guy and they called someone to meet him there, or he was with 3 people, but he was saying, all right, we gotta go. And so they drive to this trailer. The old woman is out. The old woman is out like in the street or in the yard, so she's okay. And so James Hanzey takes control. So he doesn't have a gun. He's not even supposed to be legally working. So he tells one of the guys he's with, give me your handgun. You take the rifle. You go around the back. You go, we're just going to get this done right here. And what comes out later in the interrogation, which was a huge no-no, is James went into the trailer first. He wasn't on duty. He wasn't legally supposed to even be working. It wasn't his gun. And to go in first, they were saying, if the person in there shot and killed you, it's not like, and there was a uniformed policeman there. They're like, why didn't you send him in first? But anyway, they all right, we're going in. And they bust in. And if you see a picture of James, it's just hilarious to think of him like slinking around this place covertly trying to clear it. And at one point he's down and he's looking around and he says that he saw a flash of light in front of him, and so he went to raise his partner's gun to defend himself from the flashing light. He hits, as he's bringing the gun up, he runs it into the side of the counter. The gun goes off. He shoots into the floor of this lady's trailer. And then they kind of clear it out. And it comes out that there was never 2 men. This woman has dementia and has hallucinations. Very sad. My grandmother had Parkinson's and went through the same thing, and it was horrifying. Like one time she called me, I was maybe in like 7th grade, and she calls me and she goes, Scott, they won't let us across the river. And I was like, Grandma, it's horrible, terrifying. And so it comes out that this woman has dementia, and the week before she thought Donald Trump was in her bedroom. And so now, it comes out there was no one ever in the trailer, and so I think James immediately turns to, oh my gosh, I just accidentally shot my partner's gun into the floor in this woman's trailer at nothing. And so, as you can imagine, an accidental discharge could be the straw that breaks the camel's back that led into the investigation which eventually brought down the great James Hanzey. So, as you can imagine, once the mayor hears that trusty James Hanzey fired a gun when he wasn't even supposed to be on duty inside an old woman's trailer, she then contacted a neighboring police department, and a detective gets assigned to fully investigate James Hanzey. everything, the organization of the shop, all of the records that they turn into city council, this accidental discharge shooting that happened, the whole 9 yards. And the detective does a great job. And on April 4th, 2018, in the neighboring police department, James Hanzey gets pulled in for an interrogation. So here we go. So they sit him down. His torso is just the star of the show at this point. So they sit him down, and this interrogator has a really cool strategy that maybe I've seen it before, but it wasn't done well enough where I could put my finger on it. But what he does is he's got a number of things that he's going to accuse James of doing, and it's the accidental shooting, their hours logged are a total mess and a nightmare. The way that they junk cars was brought into question. Let's see here, some insurance checks that were cashed. But anyway, he has a couple of these, say like 4 or 5 things that he's going with. Instead of bringing one up and exhausting it all the way to the end, he'll bring it up for a little bit, talk about it, and as soon as James is starting to get a little mad, saying like, that is 1,000,000% an accident, and that was not meant to defraud anybody. And as soon as he starts to build up a little bit, the interrogator just cuts off that topic and they go on to the next one. And it never gets to the full accusation. So he'll do the first part of one, then he'll do the first part of the other, and then he'll come back and do like the second part of the first one. And what that turns into is James has no idea how many things he's going to be accused of doing and at what point he is in the accusation. So he has no idea if he's 90% done with the accusations or if he's 10%. And so it leaves him guessing, like, when should I really blow up and try to defend myself? When should I kind of just act, hey, we're all police officers? He has no idea, and at points he'll go full on, this is 1,000,000% not fair and all this stuff. And then he kind of runs out of gas, and there's a silence, and then the the detective goes, okay, so let's move on to the next one. And it gets all high and stressed, and then he brings it way down, and that just leaves James kind of always guessing, like, is this the last thing that I'm going to be? So when he comes down and sits down, I like the detective goes, all right, we're going to start. Do you have any questions? I like that. Doesn't give any of his hand away. Just, do you have any questions? And it's obvious that James thinks that he is going to he thinks, all right, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to get grilled about my embarrassing accidental shooting, and I'm going to probably have to answer a few questions about some disorganization or whatever it is, but, it's not going to be a big thing. He has no idea this is the end. All of the investigation is done. All of the binders of all of his just incompetent practices, neglect, everything is right here. So like I said, he thinks, all right, I'm going to get grilled about the accidental shooting. I can take it, and then I'll be on my way. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. So he goes, do you have any questions? And he goes, they said there's going to be something about public records or village property or reports. And the detective goes, all right, we'll get to that. But first, tell me about this accidental shooting. We want to hear about it. You're the guy that did the accidental shooting. And he takes a little bit of a dig by saying that to James. By saying, like, you're the guy. By saying that, he's telling James that everybody in all of the police departments around the area have been talking about the moron that shot his partner's gun inside a woman's trailer And so they're like, you're the guy. So I think that immediately kind of puts James, and James likes to call it an accidental discharge. And he really tries to normalize it. Just like, yeah, I mean, it was an accidental discharge. He tells the story of, yeah, we got that call, and I know it's procedure to have a police officer that's actually can legally work go in, but, you guys would have done the same, and I had an accidental discharge, and we checked the house. We checked the house to make sure it didn't hurt any of the piping or anything, and then we sat the woman and her son down, and we said, listen, we had an accidental discharge. I shot into the floor. We checked your house. Everything is okay. And they weren't mad about it. And then they go, and so they're listening to him tell the story. And like I said, he's just trying to normalize it. Yeah, accidental discharge, it happens. And the detective, their tone about it is like, it was an accidental shooting, and that's insane. So their tone is the opposite. And then the detective goes, when you guys left, did you tell the two guys you were with not to tell anyone in my department or in our police force? Like, did you tell them not to tell anybody? And he goes, yeah, I did, because I can't remember the name, old Brian, it loves to tell people. So I was thinking, hey, before we go around and tell everybody, hey, there was an accidental discharge, let's have there be an investigation. I wasn't trying to hide it. How could you hide an accidental discharge? Which is right. There's no way you can. But he's going, that guy liked to tell a lot, and he's building up the tone of his just normalizing, yeah, it happens. I was defending myself against the Flash, is now he's realizing, okay, these detectives aren't meeting me halfway like a good colleague, and so he's starting to build up, and he's like, yeah, I told him not to tell. I figured we shouldn't tell until there's an investigation, and it's building up, but instead of completing the interrogation about the accidental discharge, he cuts it off right there, which, like I said, I think is a good strategy. He goes, okay, let's go over some hours logged. And so, James with the big torso and the little arms, he's all worked up, ready to keep going, and then all of a sudden it brings the energy down, and now he has no idea where it's going again. And so it's like, all right, let's talk about your hours. And then he says, I'll be honest with you, Jimmy. He calls him Jimmy a lot. Jimmy, his name's James, but Jimmy, I'll be honest, everybody says the same thing, that you go home a lot. You're always going home. And when they came and checked on you, you were sitting on the couch in shorts and a t-shirt watching Cops. And Jimmy's going, well, just because I'm home, not in my uniform, doesn't mean I don't have something in the mix. It doesn't mean that I'm not doing something on my computer, or I'll go and look at tag numbers. And again, right when he's starting to get grilled and starting to get a little frustrated with, the way this is going, boom, cuts it off. It's almost like a Tarantino movie. Like, you have all of these storylines, but instead of just this whole story and then this whole story, it's like a chunk of this story and then a chunk of this story and then the ending of this one, and it builds like that to the point that James, in about an hour and 15 minutes, there's nowhere to go. And so I think the strategy works. So they're talking about the hours logged. James, you're in shorts and a t-shirt watching Cops while you're getting paid. What are you doing? And a lot of it is just like, oh, well, okay, yes, so the hours logged sheet. So I see what happens is I fill out the log sheet and then I hand it over to Deb. See, and Deb, she prints out the cover sheet and he hands it over to Ed. By that point, I'm working my shift. I'm out doing my thing. Ed then finalizes it, signs it, and gives it to the city council. So see, I should have checked it, but that's probably what happens. The sheet, I give it to Deb, but this, so he always just rambles about like inner department incompetence and that he should have checked. He delegated the job and he should have checked, but he trusted, and so he always rambles on that. And then but he goes, but it wasn't on purpose. This was not meant to steal anything. I have never. And then when he's really when he really feels accused of something, he has this thing where he goes, like, it is 1,000,000%. Like he goes, I honestly, wholeheartedly, 1,000,000%. He's like almost starts to cry when he's really getting into it too and getting accused of something. Another time he goes, it was 1,000,000,000% a mistake. I wasn't trying to do it on purpose. And so it's building. So the hours logged. James, you're in a t-shirt and shorts watching cops when they show up. It wasn't on purpose. 1,000,000,100%. All right, and then just like the other one, right when it starts to build up, all right, well, how do you guys junk cars? And James is, yeah, what? When you guys end up with a car that no one claims, how do you junk it? And this portion is that there's reports where they would get cars that were abandoned or whatever, and then people would take off batteries and even like in the department and sell them, or someone took off a water pump and gave it to his brother was the allegation, which you can't do. Which I didn't even know how strict all of the records for these police departments have to be, but so he's getting just grilled like, are you guys taking batteries off the cars before you bring them to the junkyard for yourselves? And like I said at the beginning, when they asked him at the start of the interrogation, hey, do you have any questions? He didn't think all of this was coming. So he thought there was going to be maybe a little incompetence allegation, talk about some logged hours. And so he's totally blindsided by this point, just going, if anybody took a battery, they had permission from the mayor. And it's going. All right, now we go, build it up. Again, he cuts it right off. All right, let's go back to the accidental discharge. And so now we're back to the first storyline. And he goes, Jimmy, you weren't even legally supposed to work. You had to turn in a doctor's note to the mayor. The mayor already was not thrilled with Jimmy at all up until the point when he shot the floor in the ladies' trailer. And she had told him, you got to bring me the doctor's note. She wanted him to bring it to her. And so the mayor was telling him, so imagine how mad you'd be with the mayor. You're waiting for Jimmy, who's incompetent and lazy and has a strange torso. You're waiting for this doctor's note. You're wondering what the hell to do with him. And before you even get the doctor's note, you get the story that he shot his partner's gun into the floor of a trailer in a woman that has dementias. And so you could see how it was like, all right, we're doing a full investigation. But so then he's grilled about how he wasn't legally supposed to be working. And then he cuts that one off and it goes, Jimmy, who is in charge of the auxiliary hours for your guys' whole department? And just like all the answers, Jimmy starts going, well, Deb starts the sheet, and then she fills it out, hands it over, and they're like, no. Who is responsible for the numbers on the sheet when you guys give it to city council? So when they pay everybody in your department, who is responsible for making those sure those numbers are correct? And after trying to say, I'm not even there when they're, after doing a lot of that, eventually goes, well, ultimately me, I'm responsible. And this one, he starts to eat it hard. And so they have all of the detective really did a good job of putting all these numbers together to make it nowhere to really run or explain. So he's just go slowly and meticulously and clearly going all these things that don't match up. And Jimmy blurts out, well, those numbers are estimations. They're not meant to be correct. And so he's saying, how do you guys even do your hours, Jimmy? Because this is the hours logged, and the hours that the city is paying you guys are, like you said, not correct. So how is that working? And Jimmy goes, all right, well, so the people that are working full time, they get 40 hours. So then we put the 40 in the box. And they're like, no, Jimmy, we get the full-time people. We're talking auxiliary hours. And he pulls out the report and he goes, this guy who's marked under as the taser trainer, he gets 16 hours a month. Does he work 16 hours a month, Jimmy? He gets paid by the city for 16. So is he working? And Jimmy's like, well, no, he comes in about once every other month and does our taser training. But the mayor, two mayors ago, said that would be okay. And they're like, 2 mayors ago? What about? And they're like, okay, well, and so the taser trainer, he's getting paid and barely working. And they're like, what about Vicky Glover? Does she work? And James is like, no, Vicky Glover hasn't worked here for 2 years. And they're like, well, she's gotten 16 hours a month. She's gotten paid for 16 hours a month, and she doesn't even work here. And James is looking at it like, no one took her off the sheet. Shoot. See, someone should have, when she wasn't working here, took her off the sheet, but no one did. Shoot. Okay. Oh, see, I'm glad that you guys pointed that out. And they're like, Jimmy, this isn't just a little whoopsie doopsie. This woman was paid by the city for 2 years. And then they go, what system do you guys have for recording auxiliary hours? Because all the overtime and auxiliary hours seem to just be wrong. And Jimmy goes, well, we had a system 4 years ago, but I don't even know what happened, why it went out. But since then, we haven't had a system. And they're like, you haven't had a system to log hours for the whole department in 4 years, Jimmy? And he's like, yeah, yep. And by this time, he's dying a miserable interrogation death. He's mad. He's that type of mad, too, where he's used to being a police chief. So he's used to being in charge and having the authority and the one making the accusations. And he's starting to get mad because they say, in regards to putting in more hours for himself and other people, and along with just slowly laying out all of everything and giving him nowhere to go, another one of the strategies is every once in a while, the detective changes his tone and goes, Jimmy, that could be a criminal offense. Logging those hours wrong and getting extra money, that could be criminal, Jimmy. You know, we're here doing this internal investigation, but now we're talking criminal, Jimmy. And I thought that Jimmy or James is both the same, or his response was interesting. Instead of saying, well, it was a nightmare, we were unorganized, the first thing he says is, that could be criminal, Jimmy. He goes, there's no monetary value. Almost like he had thought about it before. Like, okay, could this be a crime, or could we claim we're just incompetent? So he goes, this could be criminal, Jimmy. And Jimmy goes, there's no monetary value. And then, so for the first time, the detective goes, this is the time to explain it, Jimmy. This is where it can be explained. Because this interrogation, I think technically is an internal investigation. And then if you find anything that can be criminal charges, but as of right now, it's just an internal investigation, and he has Garrity rights. Instead of Miranda rights, they read him his Garrity rights. And so there are times like this where like, this is the time you need to explain it. But James knows that he knows that he has to treat it like a criminal interrogation, and he will be later charged with a few counts. Okay, so like I said, the detective changes tone, he brings it down, and he goes, Jimmy, this is where it needs to be explained. This could be criminal. All right. And then he moves to maybe the, hardest hitting accusations, but regarding Jimmy's finger that was amputated, he received some checks that were insurance checks that weren't supposed to go to him, and he cashed them, 4 of them. And so they confront him with that. They say, Jimmy, you cashed these 4 checks, and this is when really, I don't know if it's because this could really turn into serious charges, or maybe he really was an accident, but Jimmy really gets angry on this one. And this is where he does so they're saying, did you cash these checks? Like on top of everything else? And James is almost crying, and he goes, I honestly, wholeheartedly, 1,000,000% believed them checks were mine. He goes, this is starting to piss me off. And he's pounding on the table. And they're going, okay. And just like all the other ones, right when it starts to build up, he doesn't get any resolve. That's the thing, is on none of these, he doesn't get any, the detectives don't give him any resolve in the sense of like, okay, all of the allegations and information that we have about that, it's just like, no, are you kidding me? And then they move on, and it's him being like, well, is that the end of that one? But you can't even think about it because it's moving on to the next one. So I think the detective's timing was beautiful. All right, so now it's back to the hours. So right when he's like, it's 1,000,000% an accident, I'm getting mad now. I'm getting pissed off now. They go, okay, well, let's go back to the hours. How many people in your department, how many officers work at one time? And Jimmy goes, 2, probably like 2 is what, we don't want to spend too much of the city's money, so we do about 2 or 3. And he goes, well, would there ever be a reason to have 4 officers working at one time? And he goes, no. And the detective goes, well, here's a date back. Do you remember you have 4 officers working on this date? And they always slide over the paper to Jimmy, and Jimmy puts on his reading glasses and looks at him like perplexed, like, how did this happen? This is unbelievable. And they go, Jimmy, do you remember going 4-wheeling that day with one of your colleagues while you guys were both on the books being paid to work? And Jimmy's like, oh, yep, yeah, we did go 4-wheeling that day. Yes, I do remember, because the first place we went to was closed, and then we went 4-wheeling. Yes, I do remember we went 4-wheeling that day. And I'm like, so why are you still on the report as working that day and getting paid all day that day? You had, And he goes, oh, shoot, yeah, I should have put in PTO. It just was a brain whoop. And and they're like, okay, so if you were to go 4-wheeling, was that a sick day? He goes, no, we don't really have sick days. It's all just PTO, paid time off. So if you need a day or you want a day to go 4-wheeling, you just put PTO down. And they say, well, why didn't you do that? You put in that you worked. And he goes, yeah, well, I must have just screwed it up. I was probably just doing it really fast. It's just a mistake. I should have said PTO. And they said, well, if you just worked a normal day, it would be 10 hours, but you actually put in 12 hours. So not only did you put in that you worked, but you put in that you worked overtime. And that's a lot of these, that's how it is. So it's like an exact accusation. And then he defends that, and then they show him the record, and it's even worse. They left a little part out that even makes the accusation worse, which leaves Jimmy deflated, or at least his arms are deflated. His body is still pumped up most of the time. So he just keeps... And a great line, the detective goes, Jimmy, that's just not accurate. And Jimmy's going, I didn't do it on purpose, and the 16 out, and he stops, and there's a pause, and he just goes, I can understand it looks terrible. And then the detective has this whole binder filled, and it's the point where he just goes, Jimmy, this whole binder is just chocked full of this stuff. These are all complaints of people that work with you. This is all of just, look at all this stuff. And I like it. Jimmy goes, he kind of gets this air of confidence, like he's got something really up his sleeve. And he goes, that is probably all from Steve Ritter. And he kind of changes pause. He goes, Steve Ritter wants my job. He's always wanted my job. And he starts to kind of kick flip it like Steve Ritter's after him. And he goes, that is all from Steve Ritter, isn't it? And the detective goes, Jimmy, I can tell you honestly, 100% that not any of this came from Steve Ritter. And the confident, the posture Jimmy had just falls apart. And he goes, none of it came from Steve Ritter? And the detective goes, none of it. So that strategy did not last. Okay, so then they get into log sheets. I got to hurry up. This video is going to take all day to upload if I don't. So then they get into log sheets, and 3 months of their log sheets are missing from last year. So think about that. I'm not totally positive what log sheets are, but they sound very important. It's the log sheets. I think it's when you take a call, you got to go and do the log. But anyway, the log sheets for Jimmy's department were just totally missing for 3 months. So God knows what kind of corruption or incompetence that was hiding. Okay, so now at the point, James has just, through all the slow, meticulous build of all the storylines, and you can only go, it's 1,000,100% a typo. It was a typo. I'm getting pissed off here. You can only do that so many times before it's absurd. I think that is another strategy to just keep bringing it back down to because it's hard to keep that. And so now he's sitting there and he has a full switch. And so now he's like, okay, there's no way I can deny this or blame it on someone else. So he goes, all right, guys, I have no problem looking you in the eye. And so he says, I have no problem looking you in the eye and saying we need to tighten up. But to say I ripped people off is bull. I lost marriages. I lost girlfriends. And so he does this big old monologue of, I may have made some mistakes, but I never stole anything from anyone. And I never would. I lost marriages. I lost girlfriends. And then a funny line, and he goes, just because I'm not at the station in my uniform and I'm home on the couch wearing t-shirt doesn't mean I don't have something in the mix. I love that. It doesn't mean I don't have something in the mix. Someone at some point, I thought it was funny, made a complaint to the mayor saying, quote, he is worthless and doesn't do anything. He never did anything. Okay, and then, so there's a lot of talk by the detectives like, Jimmy, we want you to come out of this okay, whether it's with a job or without a job. We want you to come out of this with, without charges, basically. And there's a while that Jimmy, towards the end, is going, they're going to fire me. I know the mayor's going to fire me. I think he realizes, I hope I don't lose my job over this. So he kind of switches out of that, and he goes back to, if they do let me keep my job tomorrow, I'm going to start running a tight ship. Starting tomorrow, it's going to be tighter than a nun's. And the detective goes, okay, we know where you're going with that one, Jimmy. But he really starts to throw all of his colleagues under the bus in a last-ditch effort to just save some sort of respect for himself. So he's just ragging, saying, well, that Steve Ritter did this, and if I would have kept a binder on Adam, then it would have been this, and they're basically saying, but, I mean, you're right. If you would have kept a record that Adam was doing the things you're saying, he would probably be interrogating too, but you were the chief. You were the boss, Jimmy. The buck, remember? And then at one point, the detective goes out because he has to go to the bathroom, and Jimmy's scared. He asks the other guy, the assistant, he goes, am I going to jail? Did he go out? I'm going to jail, aren't I? And they go, oh, no, I don't think so. And it pretty much ends with Jimmy just trying to play all sides, like a little bit of him, saying it was a mistake, 1,000,000% a typo. And then also a little bit of, but I really appreciate you guys showing me where I could tighten up, and I will tighten up. And if I'm lucky enough to keep my job, then it will be tighter than a nun's. And then also a healthy dose of, that being said, Steve Ritter is one of the laziest. And Adam and this vicious, childlike, bring everybody down with him. And then it ends with him just being like, I'm not mad at you guys. I've known you for a long time. We should have a beer. And the detectives being like, oh, well, I hope you wouldn't be mad. We're just doing our job. And there it is. And so the interrogation ends. He was charged with doing background checks on the police system for not police duties. So pretty much the biggest disaster of a police department run by James Hanzey that I've ever heard of. Pretty funny interrogation. Check it out. I will put a link to the interrogation in the description. Also, I'm going to do a quick video still telling the story about where these shirts came from, but I'll put a link if you want to buy one of these sweets. We're Not Here for Any Reason True Crime Loser shirts. There also will be a link. I hope you're having you had a great week and a great weekend. It's coming up. Ghislaine Maxwell. Some of the documents have been released or unsealed, I guess. I'll take a look at those. The big deposition with all the names, though, it was postponed, the release, to allow her defense to put an appeal together. And then if they fail on putting a good appeal together, that one will be released on Monday. But a bunch of things were released, and so I'll take a look at those. And see you next time. Why, Stiven, why? Next, last question, Schmied.